What up, world, and welcome to another episode of Beer Talk Now. I'm your host, D. Neal, and yes, we are on the live stream. I have the pleasure to do my first live stream with the co-founder of Omega Yeast out of Chicago, Illinois, and they do have the business office in St. Louis. So shout out to the Lou, Lance Shaner. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm very good, and thank you for having me on.
Now, do you have any beer with you? Because I didn't send you the precursors to drinking beer. You don't have to, of course, but I definitely want to showcase all the beer that you that you're involved in, at least here in the Bay Area. But do you have any beer of your own that you'll be drinking today?
I don't right now. We have, before I left work, we were we have a thing where we do karaoke at work, because we have so many people who like to sing, musicians and things like that. So there was, a beer or two had there, and that's my allotment for the day.
Nice. Now that makes sense to me. So let's get it started. First of all, Omega Yeast, wonderful name, by the way. Love the name. You're a home brewer in college, and then from home brewing in college, what made you transition to the actual ingredient side, being yeast, versus what a lot of home brewers that I've had an opportunity to interview who are now head brewers or assistant head brewers, instead of going through the traditional route of I'm a home brewer, now I'm going to become a head brewer at a brewery, or I'm going to start my own brewery?
Yeah, so it was a bit of a meandering path. So from undergraduate, where I did start to homebrew, and as a microbiology major then, I moved to Houston, Texas, and went to graduate school. And that was actually studying yeast. So I ended up getting a PhD there. I was studying yeast, but not in the context of brewing, but more in the human health context. But it was, more opportunity to get hands-on experience with yeast. But then moved from there. I was getting a little burned out of doing bench science, so I actually went to law school and became a patent attorney. So as a biotech patent attorney, where you have to have both the legal training and the scientific training. And so it was, and so from there I moved back to Chicago. While I was an attorney that I had this very, what turned out to be a life-changing conversation with one of my colleagues, Andy Smith, who's one of the co-founders of 1090 Brewing here in the Chicago area. And he was just talking about where he's going to be getting his yeast and how, it's being shipped across the country. So it just sparked this idea, there's nobody doing this in the Midwest. Chicago was, blowing up at the time. This was 2013. So there are lots of breweries forming in Chicago. So it's like, hey, we could probably start this and serve just local breweries. So that was the thought. We could get it off the ground without even having to go beyond Chicago. It was literally that conversation. It wasn't on my mind before then. The only thing, I was just getting a little tired of being a lawyer. So I just kind of was in a frame of mind of finding something new, and had that conversation and ran with it.
Now, how did the patenting, being a patent lawyer, especially in the biosciences or biology, did I get that?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, biotech.
Like how did that transition and help you for what you're doing now in your business with yeast? Because let me take an educated guess, and not just assume, but definitely with the different strands that you're looking at making from outside just the wild yeast, but the ones that you cultivate, that you're definitely looking at putting patents, if I'm not mistaken. But by all means,
sure. So so the strains that people have been using for decades are not patentable. So they're so the way you really protect something like that, strains that are already widely used, is by trademark. So just what you call them. So it's certainly a kind of intellectual property, but you can't stop other people from using that strain. You can stop other people from using that name. So that's one of the ways you protect strains. But if you do create a strain in the in a lab, like if we made it with another yeast, or if we do some genetic engineering to it, those are patentable. So things where the hand of man has been involved in changing them in some way, you can patent those. So we do have, some strains that we do file patent applications on. So certainly it has helped there. Although even still, we still hire patent attorneys to do that because I'm 8 years out of practice at this point. So I can certainly read them and help guide them on what I think the claims should look like and things like that. But I leave it to the professionals.
I like that. Experienced people. So I got a chance to be at Almanac Brewing Company in the Bay. You and I talked about different breweries that are using your yeast. I know that's kind of top secret sometimes, or like, oh, we go to this place or that place. But so where's your like main customer base at? Is it mainly in Chicago? Or is it just you've already went throughout the United States, or do you have a global impact when it comes to yeast and sales? Like, how is that? Where's your target audience?
For sure.
Customer base?
Yeah, I mean, we certainly started very focused in Chicago, didn't ship anywhere. I was literally driving yeast to the brewery. But from there, once we started shipping, it just, it ballooned from there. I mean, brewers, they talk to each other and they move from brewery to brewery. So most of our growth happened by word of mouth. But, so we're probably the bulk, or not the bulk of our customers, but a lot of customers are in the Midwest. And then and East Coast, West Coast. But I mean, at this point, we've sent yeast to every state, including Alaska and Hawaii. And we've shipped to 30 countries. That certainly is the logistics of doing that are difficult because even in the US, we can get, essentially anywhere except for Alaska next day. But then when, with shipping worldwide, it can be difficult when you're dealing with having to get stuff through customs, while it's still cold and whatnot. But we do have international customers too. So yeah, nationwide plus another 30 countries worldwide.
Now, what's the popular yeast that people usually like to get? I know the Norway yeast is something that people are like, oh yeah, I love it, or Norwegian yeast. Mm-hmm. What's some of the popular ones that are not common that people are like, I gotta have it?
Well, certainly when we started, the old Chico strain, so like the strain used by Sierra Nevada, popularized by them, was certainly the most popular. It's waned somewhat in popularity. At this point, literally like 25% of our production is all geared towards making one British strain that's widely used for hazy IPAs. So it's not very excitingly named, but we call it British 5. So it's the 5th British strain in our collection, and we make tons of it because the hazy IPAs are so popular. Beyond that, the Norwegian Kveits are definitely very popular. Have grown a lot over the last couple of years. There's so much flexibility, things you can do with them. You can brew hazy or brew IPAs with it. There are some very clean strains, so you can use it. It really is like a Chico replacement, but it's faster. So yeah, that's those are the most popular ones: the British 5 and then the Norwegians.
Nice. Well, I'm gonna crack open one of these beers because I'm looking at them. They're very tantalizing to me.
Yeah.
The show we drink beer, so I have and I'm gonna just shout out Almanac again. We have the Loud Hazy IPA. This is a double IPA, 8%. It's dank, tropical, and smooth. We also have the Love Hazy IPA, which again is a very colorful right there, and that is a 6.1% ABV. Again, back to that tropical aspect that most people associate with a hazy, which I do want to talk to you about when it comes to yeast. You have Vibes Hoppy Pilsner. All right, I like the color on that one. This is a crushable hoppy Pilsner, 5%. And all these yeasts now, which I should get to and ask that question, do they use all the same yeast from you, or once you sell it, you're just kind of like, I don't know what they're doing?
I mean, yeah, a lot of times I don't know what they're doing with it once it leaves our place. But the beers you've named, I think there's probably 3 different strains in use there.
So with yeast, what do people typically who drink craft beer or just drink beer in general? Because I know hops are like a really big thing, and since we're talking about hops, I'll open up the Love Hazy IPA while we're talking. Um, why is yeast so important? Because I think a lot of people just don't know why yeast is so important.
Yeah, I mean, without yeast, we don't have alcohol, for sure. Um, and uh, yeah, I mean, it affects the beer in a lot of different ways. So, for example, like the yeast that would be used for making the hazy IPA would be non-phenolic. So if you've ever had a Belgian beer where you get kind of a clovey, spicy flavor, that's coming from the yeast. But most yeast that we use for making American ales or English ales have gene, that a broken version of that gene that makes that spicy flavor. And it's just because we inadvertently selected for that over the centuries of making beer. Humans just liked a beer that didn't have that flavor to it. So yeah, you want a strain that's not phenolic. The strain in these hazy IPAs tends to produce fruity esters that complement the flavors that come from the hops. I mean, a lot of that fruitiness comes from the hops, but yeast will make esters, and those tend to smell like fruit. Yeast also actually plays a role in the haze that you see. It's not necessarily, it's not yeast in suspension causing that haze, but some yeasts will, and actually it's not even fully understood what they're doing, but there's some sort of interaction with the yeast and the hops and the malt that leaves this kind of colloidal haze that stays in suspension that people really like.
Now, when it comes to esters, just give you is that just the aroma you get? Because I was really thinking that yeast provided that flavor, but you're saying the hops give you more of that floral aspect. But does yeast produce a flavoring component that you can
Yeah.
taste? Okay.
Yeah, I mean the esters are, you taste them too. I mean they're not just aromatic, so it is part of the flavor. And especially like I was mentioning, the clovey aspect is definitely something you taste when you have a Belgian beer. So yeah.
Got it. See, I like yeast. Now, what are some when you're doing? And I know proprietary things that you probably can't discuss over over the live, which is fine. But as far as just the process of actually creating a new strand, or maybe taking a wild strand and producing something different, is it more so all lab work? Are you looking at that? How do you look to for quality wise to see if you got the actual product that you wanted to get when you're doing this creative aspect of cultivating yeast?
Sure. So basically the process of growing yeast for a brewer is just a very gradual feeding of the culture. So we start with very small cultures, and we work under a flow hood and work aseptically. So right from the start, we're confident that we're inoculating that culture with only the strain that we want. And we do each of these transfers into the larger vessels, very, very carefully so as not to cross-contaminate or get bacteria in there. But in addition to just being careful throughout the whole process, we're also doing microbiology plating just to make sure it's a pure culture. So you can use petri dishes that will have, say, a compound that kills yeast, but allow the growth of bacteria. So then basically you can have millions of yeast cells thrown on this plate, but because that chemical's in there, the yeast don't grow. And if you have 5 bacterial cells that can grow into a colony, you'll see those. So you can find 5 bacterial cells in the midst of millions of yeast cells by doing these microbiology tricks. So those are the sorts of things you do all along the way to make sure that the culture is pure all along the way and only what you want.
Wow. That's a lovely amount of science.
Yeah.
No, excuse me. Now, now as far as the team that you have that works on this, I'm taking it that they are scientists by study, or because I noticed you on the website you had home brewers along with other team members, but are most of the backgrounds of the people who are working in the lab or cultivating the yeast, is it mostly a science background that they have, or are they home brewers that have learned through their trials and error, more aspects of science, and then they're doing these this cultivation as well.
I mean, all of the above. So we certainly, probably the majority of our people have some sort of science background, microbiology, biology, anything like that. A lot of our people come from breweries too. If you were to see our facility, it looks a lot like a brewery. So, you know, being able to run pumps and all that kind of stuff that you do in a brewery are useful skills. And certainly home brewers. We have all of the above. People that came from IT and then moved into a brewery, and then kind of learned how to brew, and then ended up at our place. So we've got all those sorts of people.
That's a beautiful thing. Now, when we're talking about the business aspect, because you were mentioning that patenting, doing a patent because you have so many strands that are typically used by everyone, you can't necessarily stop them from using that particular yeast. When it comes to that trademark aspect and branding, are you spending a lot of capital with the marketing of your product? Because again, you're doing the trademark of this particular name or this particular, particular packaging. But really, I'm just getting across to the question of, is marketing a very big part of the budget? Since you're doing a trademark on the actual name, not specifically the patent on the specific strand. Oh, did you hear me?
I think I heard all that. You kind of froze there at the end.
I'm sorry.
But yeah, regarding marketing, for sure. Yeah, we definitely put a lot of emphasis on branding. I mean, just having a nice looking brand that's recognizable. We've kind of personified some of our strains. So if you see some of our homebrew packaging, some of them have kind of characters on them, and people like to wear the t-shirts with that sort of stuff on it. So yeah, we're definitely active in that sort of thing. Whenever we go to conferences, we're handing out t-shirts, so it's not unusual if you go around to a lot of breweries to see people wearing our t-shirts. So yeah, that's definitely we put emphasis on looking good, as well as having a high quality product.
Well, I'm telling you right now, whichever yeast they use here is good. It's good on this. I mean, you definitely get what the can is mentioned, especially on this the double IPA, a little stronger, a little dank. I'm a big fan of dank. Now, when it comes to beer styles or the type of beer you like, what is that? What type of beer are you drinking mostly when you have the opportunity?
Yeah, it's funny. I think you've probably seen this too. There's a meme that went around with like the evolution of a craft beer drinker, when at the beginning is drinking pilsners, and then eventually like IPAs and stouts, and then the last one is pilsners again. Yep. So I think I'm in that phase. So I went through a very hoppy phase when I first started getting into beer. But I've really come back around to drinking a lot of pilsners. Wow. I think it's a really, really good gauge of the quality of a brewery. A lot of times there's really not much for them to hide behind. There's not a lot of hops that could cover up flaws. And it's just, you can really taste all the individual ingredients in a pilsner. They're all kind of in harmony. So that's why I've reverted back to drinking, lighter beers. Definitely not like, macro, stuff like that, but a good craft pilsner, where you can taste the Saaz hops and taste the German malt and stuff like that. Yeah, that's I've come full circle.
Now, with that pilsner or lager aspect, do you like more of the malt characteristics more, or is it you want to get the taste of the esters that the yeast produce, or the hops? What stands out to you mostly on your palate when it comes to drinking pilsner and a lager? Yeah,
I mean, it depends. Like in my fridge right now, I've got a Helles, which definitely leans way more heavily on the malt. So that's really kind of a malt showcase. But the pilsner I have in there really is I think epitomizes the harmony of everything. It's, assertively bitter, but you can still taste the malt. It's clean, kind of a floral note from the noble hops. So that's definitely my favorite right now, where it's all the ingredients kind of working in concert.
Nice. Well, since you talked about it, I got a couple of I got 2 Pilsners right here. I got a Vibes Hop Pilsner, which again, I just like the color, so we'll open that one. So Chicago's beer. So when you in college, were you in Illinois? What was the beer scene like? Like when you were home brewing, were your dorm mates or roommates like, the hell are you doing? Or was it more like, yes, this is what we're talking about, beer that we make and we enjoy? Like what was the scene at that time when it came to craft beer in Illinois?
I mean, much smaller than it is now. I mean, because this was 1999 when I first started, so not nearly as advanced. I don't think at the time there was anybody in Champaign, Illinois. I don't think there was a brewery, microbrewery in Champaign. There's multiple now, in and around Champaign, as there are everywhere.
Goose Island, and I'm trying to think of a whole bunch of other ones that.
In the Chicago area, we've got well over 100 that are in the Chicago area. There were a limited craft selection at like the local. I don't even remember what the name of the liquor stores were there, but a small selection. But I think where I got the broadest kind of education would have been from the homebrew club. I mean, there were just top-notch homebrewers there. I remember specifically somebody who had brewed a Sierra Nevada Celebration Day clone.
Wow.
And that one was like really, really inspiring, and got the recipe for it, because that was one of my favorite beers. And here I'm tasting what this guy made at home that almost tasted better because it was even fresher. So the best beer I had was probably from the members of that homebrew club. But yeah, it's definitely, there's more breweries around Champaign at this point.
So it seems like Sierra Nevada everybody seems to have a Sierra Nevada, and it's like, boom, my world is like wide open to craft beer at the time. Like that is, I've heard it so many times in so many different places, which is amazing to me. Being that Sierra Nevada is a lot closer, to where I'm at. So
they're still killing it.
Yeah. Now did you get to fan out or go to Sierra Nevada? Did you get to provide them yeast? Is that something on the checklist of things you want to do as a former home brewer, or unless you still homebrew, to go through that, to watch their process and go hang out with them? I think that would be great.
Yeah, I mean, we have provided small amounts of yeast to their R&D group. I don't know if they've ever stepped it up into large volumes, but and that was definitely, I got kicks out of those sorts of things along the way when somebody would reach out to you that you already knew, like you knew this name, and they're reaching out to you to get yeast. Was I still have those sorts of moments when it's like, oh, who just sent an email to us, like, isn't that cool? Oh, so that's been opportunities to be a fanboy on that sort of thing. If you ever get speaking of Sierra Nevada, the Asheville, North Carolina facility is just gorgeous, and brand new, ground up sort of facility. It's really neat. And if you can get there, that New Belgium is also in town. They've got a outpost out there, and they're both really neat, breweries that have really good tours. They're groundbreakers for sure, and still are producing great beer.
Well, pre-COVID, were you doing tours at your facility to showcase what you're doing with your yeast? And are you bringing in like college students? Did you bring in breweries or potential salespeople? Did they get a chance to look at the facility at all?
So it turns out that during COVID, we were actually building our new space. So it was Yeah, so that was, you know, a whole other, there are obviously stresses on multiple levels, but that was one of them, and that we were trying to build this building while that was happening. So you know, it's not something we've started up yet, and certainly never had it from the start, because we moved in there, you know, last July. So that was certainly while still things were still pretty bad. So yeah, we have not yet set up any sort of official tours, but it's definitely something we, you know, plan on doing once it makes sense to bring tour groups through there. And at some point, we've also talked about having kind of like a small tap room there, so that people could try, you know, split batch beers, you know, fermented with different yeast. That's, you know, there's no set date on that sort of thing, but that's something we'd like to do. But before that time, we probably will be bringing in tour groups at some point that can get a look at how we do things.
Nice. Now, when you get a chance to go to other countries and discover different strands out there, or is that more so left to your team who does that when they get to travel and they're doing their showcase of your yeast? Or like, how do you find new strands of yeast or just wild strands that you want to cultivate and change it into something else that fits Omega Yeast mission?
So wild yeast isn't something we've ever spent a whole lot of effort doing. I know some people do, but we haven't. But as far as like where we get strains, it's all over the map. There's for a lot of the Norwegian strains came straight from Lars, who if you ever want to have some good reading, Lars' blog is a really, really good read. But Lars is the one that went around Norway and kind of did a close look at all these Norwegian farmhouse cultures, and then shared them with the world, including us. So we got those directly from him. Wow. There's also, you know, like a yeast bank that's in the UK where one could get. They've got, you know, British brewing strains that have been banked for decades that one could order if they want. And then of course, just isolating yeast from bottles. It's really, really easy to get like Brettanomyces, you know, kind of wild yeast from just straight from Belgian lambics. I mean, one of the neat things about that is you can have a lambic sitting on your shelf that's been sitting on the beer store shelf for 10, 15 years, and there's still live yeast in there, live Brettanomyces that survives that. And you can plate that out and grow it up and use it. So yeah, it depends, but all sorts of different sources.
Now, when it comes to the scalability of Omega, like when did you, from when you started to that, right for that moment where you started to get more customers, like when was that? And then how are you continuing the reach to get more customers to buy Omega yeast?
Yeah, I mean, we started out in like a 1,300 square foot space, and very small, and eventually, you know, outgrew that. And then, I mean, and the growth, you know, by and large was word of mouth. Brewers do talk to each other a lot, so you know, they one brewer would use it and they'd recommend it to somebody else, and that's how we grow. So it's been, but in addition to the word of mouth type growth, we've I mean, we go to trade shows, you know, like the CBC, for example, we go to every year, and have a booth there, and that's a really great place to meet lots of brewers. We, you know, we'll travel around and go to, you know, a city, like, you know, we go to Pittsburgh, for example, and then we'll meet up with customers that we already work with, but also try to meet up with brewers that we don't, and, you know, do some business generation that way. Yeah, and I mean, from the start, we doubled output every year until the pandemic. Still managed to grow a little bit during that year, which we took as a huge victory. And we're on pace for really, really good growth this year. It seems like everybody's in a mood to drink.
Yes. And I love it, Lance. I love that everybody's drinking, calling you up. We need more yeast. Great.
Yeah, that's been, I mean, the last couple months have been, our best months ever. And yeah, I think it's because, people are looking to get out there and, after being holed up for a year and start getting back out to the tap rooms and having a good time.
Yeah, I agree. Now, what city for you is like you love that city when it comes to visiting or going to different shows? Because when you said Pittsburgh, there's actually a Fresh Fest, which was a Black Brewers Festival. They changed the name to Barrels and Flow, and they'll be out in Pittsburgh this year in September. But I mean, I haven't got a chance to travel so many different states and cities to go to different beer fests. So the ones that you've been to or showcases that you've been to, which one is your favorite?
Yeah, I mean, I probably brought up Pittsburgh because that is the one that comes to mind. I'm not quite sure how it even happened, but I mean, it's probably the same way it happened everywhere else, where somebody tried us in that city, and then again, they all talk to each other, they all know each other, so then we kind of spread around Pittsburgh. So we work with a lot of Pittsburgh breweries. So I've had a lot of fun when I've gone there to talk to these guys and get their story about how much Pittsburgh has grown as a craft beer city. And I mean, everywhere I went, it was, fantastic beer. They're doing good stuff there. And they talk about how, it wasn't that long ago where it was really not that way. I mean, it was, they didn't have much, but it grew rapidly, and they're all seemingly all having success and helping each other.
Yes, collaboration is definitely key in the craft beer world. So I definitely like that. As far as home brewers, like, how do you help home brewers? Like, how do you and when I say help them with their picking, selecting different yeast, because maybe they don't need the quantity that you provide typically to a brewery. But how does that connection with the home brewers still is sustained when it comes to Omega Yeast as a company?
Yeah, I mean, I do a lot of, well, especially during the pandemic, a lot of, Zoom sort of meetings with homebrew clubs. And really, that was one of the other things we did pre-pandemic too, is when we'd go to some place like Pittsburgh, we'd also meet up with like a homebrew club, and I'd, give kind of a talk on some aspect of yeast, on, something we're researching, something like that. In addition to going around to breweries and talking to them. So there's a lot of face-to-face with homebrew clubs that continued in a digital format, during the pandemic. Looking forward to getting back out there and doing that sort of thing in person, because that's always, I really enjoyed doing that. We get tons of emails from homebrewers, so it's not uncommon that I'll be answering those sorts of things when people reach out through the info email address. Some homebrewers will call us directly and ask questions, and then a lot of it too is the shops we work with tend to be the ambassadors, and explaining how things should be used, and which strains would be better for which styles, things like that. So we rely a lot on the shop owners.
So how do you keep that relationship going with the shop owners and the shop owners first, and then also with the brewers who do the word of mouth? Because again, like you said, craft beer seems like it could be very huge, but it's also very small, because so many different brewers change to different breweries, like let's say every couple of years, every 5 years, anywhere 2 to 5. Like, how do you keep that relationship going, so as they move, or even if they are not necessarily buying Omega Yeast at that time, how do you make sure that you build that sense of community with both the shops who sell the home brewers and the brewers themselves, to keep them coming to Omega Yeast?
Yeah, consistency in quality, I think, is the number one. I mean, if they've continued to have a good experience, and the yeast is performing as expected, they'll keep working with us because they've come to rely on us. But also, really, really good prompt customer service, which is something we pride ourselves on. I mean, when you call us, you talk to somebody who knows yeast, and my understanding is that's not necessarily the case with all of the providers. So we make it easy to get in touch with us. So yeah, quality number one, I think, is what keeps us, keeps people coming back, and prompt customer service.
Yes. Good. Now, how does the training go when it comes to your team? Like, how do you train them so that they're prepared, especially customer service, to answer these questions? I take it that they're like home brewers themselves, or they're people who really work with beer, a craft beer with yeast enough so that people feel confident. But how do you do the training with, say, a new person, a person who's kind of just into it, but really wants to be a part of the Omega Yeast family?
Yeah, I mean, on the main customer service side, so the guy that we have that handles most of that he was our first employee, and he came to us really as just a home brewer. Like, he didn't have any professional brewing experience. He's actually a former college professor, but had left that. So he's an incredibly smart guy, and he learned over the years. I mean, he's been with us so long that he knows how we do things because he's been there every step of the way. But he kind of morphed over into being the person who answers the technical questions and deals with doing our schedule and all that. So that was really kind of, growth from within. And, as we've grown, I mean, we have, 35, 40 employees in Chicago now. So it's had to get more formalized over the year. When there was like 4 of us in the space, we just kind of would teach, I'd teach the newcomers as they'd come in. But with a lot more specialization that we've had over the years, we've had to very, formalize everything and make sure we've got very solid SOPs on how we do everything, and that, people have to follow those, and they're, ticking off boxes to make sure they're accountable on everything. And, strong management in each section to make sure that that people are following SOPs, doing everything properly and safely. So yeah, it's just, it's changed over the years for sure. But that's, attention to detail is something we take very seriously, and we can do what we need to do by following SOPs thoroughly. So that's definitely one thing we harp on with a lot of people, and also just a very friendly culture. I mean, we've had very few people leave over the years because it's a pleasant place to work. Nobody's yelling at anybody or anything like that. It's, respectful place to work, and then we can, have fun and do karaoke on Wednesdays when our staff is overlapping. So yeah.
I like that. Now, for the people who don't know, SOPs stand for
standard operating
procedures. Yes. Yeah. How do you, and again, working in the food industry myself, when it comes to actually ensuring that these SOPs not only are followed, but are implemented on a day-to-day basis, like what is and maybe you don't know this question, but like the training regimen, how much attention, like when you're sitting in a meeting and talking to your team, how do you push forth that idea of like, these SOPs are not just a piece of paper or a document that you just post on the wall or you show somebody one time? Because I think for a lot of breweries, especially small breweries who are working to become mid-size or the community brewery, or just enough to where it's a constant cash flow of where they're able to not just break even, but go to the next level, SOPs are very important. But I think where it lacks is that you train someone one time and you're just like, okay, that's great. And I'm not saying that you do that, but how do you utilize the SOP to where it's a actual living member of the team versus just this is what we've done, same SOP we've had for a year, and then we're going to audit it at the end of the year, and that person just kind of may be lost or not even looking at it. How do you ensure that is actually a standard for the company and for the employees?
Yeah, I mean, just for very nuts and bolts sort of thing. I think a lot of, having checklists that somebody has to sign off on, and really making it. And I mean, these people having brewed before understand if we don't follow these SOPs, like the yeast could come out contaminated or not viable, and and they've brewed before and they know what can happen if that happens. So they want our customers to have a good experience. So there's that, pressure to make sure we're, following all these SOPs. Management is always, working out on the floor with people. We have a very active director of operations. We have an independent quality department. So, they don't, even though they're checking on everything that production's doing, they don't answer to production, so they can make the independent call that when something is messed up, it's not being sent out, whether, production wants it sent out or not. So maintaining the independence of those departments is kind of a check on each other, is another way to keep things consistent. And these are the sorts of things that have evolved over the years, where we've grown to this level where we have to, and there's so many cooks in the kitchen that we definitely, need to have these cross checks.
Nice. That's key right there. Shout out to all the quality assurance people, because QA is definitely a key aspect that a lot of people are like, here comes QA again. They're gonna shut me down, or they're gonna stop the process. But quality, like you said, quality is everything. I mean,
yeah, and it can disrupt a customer's schedule if we can't send something out. But most of the time, they're understanding and would rather have you have to, they'd rather have to delay their schedule for us to remake something than for us to send something that's going to cause a problem. So, we take it seriously.
I appreciate that. Now, when it comes to collaboration versus competition, and I'm getting into this question because there's a lot of different yeast companies in different states, different cities. Is it more so because craft beer, even though craft beer is everyone has a different brewery business or a tap room business, and everything's maybe different. They do a lot of collaboration where if you don't have yeast or you don't have hops, you can borrow the hops, and then when you get your next shipment and you provide it to that brewery who gave it to you, or you do a collaboration. Is that something that happens when it comes to the business of yeast, or is everyone's in their own separate silos and really just doing their own thing?
Yeah, it's definitely not the same as beer. I mean, like you said, it's a unique industry. I mean, I can't think of any other industry that all the individuals are as collaborative as they are in beer. But it's definitely not the same in yeast. I mean, I know all these folks, and like one of the fun things we've done over the years is at CBC, a lot of us, small lab folks owners will get together and we'll have, lunch together and kind of, talk to each other. But as far as doing like, official collaboration, that's not something we've done. But I'm definitely friendly with these folks and talk to them when when we're all at CBC, we'll get together and, share war stories, things like that.
Now, can you tell the audience? I know what CBC is, but can you tell the audience what CBC is, because it's a big deal?
Yeah, the Craft Brewers Conference. That moves from city to city. I think it was supposed to be San Antonio last year, and that's the one that got canceled. And they're doing it in Denver. I think it was actually supposed to be San Diego this year, in April or May, whenever it usually is. But then that got moved back, and they're going to do it in Denver in September. Not thrilled about that, because they've had it in Denver before. I've been to Denver multiple times for GABF. One of the fun things about CBC is going to new city and really kind of diving in deep to their beer scene. But done that in Denver multiple times.
I like that, Lance. I like how you look at the world. All right, let's go to somewhere new. Now, I understand, as we mentioned before, you have 30 customers around the world. What is the overall goal for you when it comes to Omega Yeast? And what I mean by that question is, are you looking to scale as high as you can go? Is it just I want us to be the most quality pound for pound? Whenever you mention Omega Yeast name, you're like, that's a company that you can rely on. Like, what is the vision, especially going to other countries? Because beer around the world has always been a big thing. In the States, it's even though it's big now, it's around the world has always been like, hey, everyone drinks craft beer in some shape, way, or form. How are you taking yourself from where you're at and the status that you're at now with Omega Yeast in the United States, and then do you want to venture out there globally and become that same brand household name as you are here?
Yeah, I mean, as far as where we want to go, I mean, I think it is, being known for quality, and then we'll grow with that. Wherever the growth comes, we'll take it, and we'll keep up with that growth. We've gotten good over the years at managing our growth and making sure we're staying ahead of the game and having enough equipment to keep up with demand and things like that, and continue to do it in a quality manner. But yeah, there's certainly, I mean, Europe is, they're probably 10, 15 years behind the US in craft beer. So it's definitely something we see. I mean, just conceptually, just the way but it's growing. I mean, we work with, Australian customers, and they were talking about, they're doing hazy, style IPAs in Western Australia. Like the styles are making it all over the world.
It's a beautiful thing, right?
Yeah, I mean, we've really exported our beer culture here, and there's I think a lot of room for growth in Europe. So France has I don't know if I've heard my business partner say this, so I assume it's true, but mentioned that there's more breweries or craft breweries in France now than there are in Germany, which is kind of crazy. To think about that. That just sounds nuts. You think of France as being a wine country, and we've gotten a lot of inquiries from Spain, and of course the Brits love their beer. So yeah, there's I think there's room for a lot of growth in Europe. So that and being located like on the continent where we could service that would be very convenient when you consider how much of a pain in the ass it is to ship internationally.
Yes, thank you. Even in the States, I was going to ask you a question about breweries, especially. And I mean, and I know you're focusing on yeast; that's your business. But because of prohibition and those draconian laws of prohibition, going state to state with beer is crazy. How are you being a representative? And I might sound like a lot. Why are you being a representative for the United States and the craft beer scene here? Because as you mentioned, you have Britain. People are looking at hazy IPAs. They're looking at IPAs in general because I mean we're talking about English bitters that were that a lot of people in the States are starting to do more, just like they're doing. Craft brewers are doing more lagers and pilsners. Now English bitters are making a comeback as far as something that is more complex and unique than what you think. Like, how is that transition between like the culture aspect of the United States through Omega Yeast by providing yeast to these other countries, and how are you being a good representative? I guess. I mean,
yeah.
I don't want to make it sound too crazy, but I really just want to. How do you want to? Really, what I'm getting at is how do you push them? Like, you're doing great. Like, go ahead and do hazy. Do the doubles, do the danks, do the barrel-aged stouts if you want to, but use our yeast.
Yeah, I mean, part of it, it's not. I mean, there's technique involved in, and in getting stable haze and getting that kind of juicy quality, and that's something we're experimenting with that sort of stuff all the time because the yeast plays a role in creating that stable haze. So. We definitely provide guidance to these folks who maybe don't have quite as much experience in, creating these consistent outcomes. So yeah, I think we do our part in kind of helping spread the culture by making sure they have all the information they need to, use our products to get the best result.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thing. I think one of the things when it comes to the business of craft beer, which again, I appreciate you being on the show, is really just showcasing just the different aspects of it. So if someone, and I know this probably would be like a weird question to ask, but I'm asking anyway. If someone's like, I want to get in the yeast business and really like extend the different strands and cultivate those as much as possible. Like what is like the biggest entry point hurdle that someone would go through with that aspect?
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing, when I think back on even starting this, I was part probably helpfully naive. I didn't know didn't know everything I didn't know. So, it's like the stuff, once I finally took that launch, it's like, well, I just quit a good paying job. So now I've got to figure it out.
Yep.
So yeah, I don't know. There's the stuff, some things you're just not going to know until you are in it. But being a lawyer, was fortunate enough to, we had enough money from both of us being lawyers that we were able to get this off the ground by, shoestring, and then just kind of grow as we grew. We could self-fund with the growth of the business. But yeah, as far as I don't know, I think the hurdle has probably gotten higher since we've started in it, which I guess is good for us. But and we've gotten to the point where we have a significant R&D budget. We put a lot into research and development and coming up with new strains and using modern genetic engineering techniques and things like that. So we've that would be, I think, a pretty hard thing to just jump in and do, without kind of growing to that space. So yeah, I don't know what I tell somebody if they're starting now, it's going to be tough. I mean, one of the hurdles we had starting out was just, especially with brewers who had been in the industry for a long time, they're like, I'm not going to trust these upstarts to
these newbies.
Yeah, I mean, like, what do you know about anything? So it was hard to get those people on board at the beginning, and that's where word of mouth came in. When the brave brewers did work with us, then they'd talk to each other, and that would give them a level of trust with us because they knew their buddy who they trust, was entrusting us. And it takes time, I mean, that's all there is to it. It takes time to build that trust from amongst brewers.
Now, do you only focus on yeast for craft beer, or do you look at like other applications for the yeast to sell to customers for Omega Yeast? Because I know craft beer is going crazy right now in the States, and like you said, around the world, where they're experimenting with different styles that most people in those countries are not familiar with. But is that are you going to focus on that and just continue to build on making sure that this one aspect of craft beer is the best quality possible? Or are you looking at other ventures with the yeast to get other customers in different sections of when it comes to alcohol that does use yeast?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we've never put much focus on things outside of beer, but we do have, I mean, like distillers will reach out to us. By and large, I think distillers mostly don't care that much about, the flavor and aroma aspects of a yeast. They mostly want alcohol, and they want it quickly, and they want a lot of it. But the yeast does come through in the distillate for certain styles. So I'm hoping that more distillers do start thinking about that sort of thing and experimenting with that sort of thing. But it is hard for them because you're talking, especially if you're talking like whiskey. Maybe you can tell the difference in the distillate when it's fresh, but after it's been sitting in a barrel for 3, 5, 6 years, can you tell then? That's a long experiment. So I think people are probably playing with that sort of thing now, but that's definitely it's tougher in that region. But we do work with distillers, especially like rum distillers, where there is a lot of fermentation character that comes through in rum. They seem more interested in exploring different yeasts. A little bit in cider. A lot of cider tend to be dry yeast users. We just make liquid brewing yeast. And seltzers are another area that we've put a lot of focus in. Now, any yeast can be used to make a seltzer, but what you need to consider, what a lot of brewers don't think about, is the nutrient aspect of it. So when you're just dumping, cane sugar into a fermenter, you need to make sure you have other things there to feed the yeast properly so that it ferments. You can imagine, if you just spoon fed yourself sugar for a week, you're not going to feel very good.
No.
Same thing with yeast. You need to provide that right mix of nutrients. So we spent a lot of time figuring out a blend of nutrients that brewers could use with the yeast they know and get good seltzers. So those are the sorts of, that's grown a lot over the last year. So yeah, we are kind of, reaching into some of these other alcoholic beverage industries, but definitely our bread and butter is beer.
Mm. I couldn't say it any better than what you just said it. Technology and R&D, like, why does it play such a key role for Omega Yeast? And then my second part of that question, and I'll stop talking, is how could R&D and technology play a better role to the craft brewers that you that are your customers as well? Do you talk to them about that in any shape, way, or form?
Yeah, I mean, a great example is the strain that we're going to be coming out with in the next month or so. So what it does is it can take, there's a gene that actually yeast have, but most of the time in beer it's not used by the yeast. But what the gene codes for an enzyme that can take what's called a polyfunctional thiol that's present in malt and hops. There's large amounts of this in this precursor form that we can't smell. But when this enzyme that's in yeast can act on this thiol, it releases an aromatic version of it. And it smells, it's actually one of the thiols that is big in Sauvignon Blanc wine or certain types of hops. But it gives this big passion fruit or grapefruit aroma. And it's active, flavor or aroma active in extremely small quantities, like parts per trillion. So you barely need any of it to have a significant impact. But through some quirk of nature that most brewing yeast don't make this enzyme in beer. So essentially what we've done is make it so that the yeast does make this enzyme while it's fermenting beer, so that you can free up all these beautiful, kind of tropical aromatics. And again, these precursors are present in malt itself, so you can get kind of these very desirable tropical notes just from your yeast choice and malt. You don't have to use these, ludicrously expensive hops to get these flavor compounds. So, we're just trying to give brewers tools to get the most out of their raw ingredients, to potentially cut down on costs, because maybe they don't have to use as much hops if they're getting this sort of aroma. And just give them another, flavor to play with and to weave into the beers they're designing, and help them stand out. That's there are a lot of breweries out there, and they want to make products that are memorable, and so we want to provide them with yeast that are going to help them do that.
I love Lance. This has been like an amazing episode because, again, yeast, a lot of people, just like malt, a lot of people focus so much on the hops because they're, especially in the States, big IPA fans, love the dank, the doubles, the triples. But I'm a big malt guy. I love malt, and I love how if the yeast can provide so many different flavors to a craft beer that you would be like, oh, did they put an adjunct in there? And like, no, it's just the yeast. And you're like, wow, it's crazy. And I think if we, to your point, focus more on like how to get quality yeast, and then also how that really reacts to what you're doing, which I think more and more craft brewers, to set themselves apart or to make the quality beer that they want, are doing and looking at, instead of just throwing a whole bunch of fruit puree. And shout out to all the people who do fruit puree, like aseptic fruit purees out there in Alpharetta, Georgia. I think it's a great thing because with craft beer, it was simple stuff. I mean, it started off with bread. You fermentating bread to make beer, and then you just continue to get better and better. But the simplicity of it, I think, is what's, especially being a lager and pilsner fan as you are, a lot of people are starting to understand that and sitting with the beer and not just thinking. And no foul to Budweiser, no foul to Heineken or Corona or Modelo, because again, they know how to make a consistent product. I just think that people are looking at beer in a more intricate way than what they were doing before, especially when you hand them a lager, pilsner, You're like, wait, this lager Pilsner is like $6 or $8 when I can get a 6-pack for or $6.99. But then they taste it and they're like, oh, okay, it's a little different than what I thought. And it's like, yeah, that's because you're starting to drink something of quality. So I love what Omega Yeast is doing. I think that, again, expand as far as you can. I think the science aspect that you do, for especially from a food science background, when I was in those labs and wasn't a fan of them, but I really enjoy that you take the time to create those SOPs and make sure that that is a part of the culture and not just a piece of paper that people follow. So,
Right.
Anything else you want to tell the Beer Talk Now community? I'll let you go ahead and say your piece because I know I like to run my mouth a lot, especially when drinking beer.
Yeah, no, I was just, keep follow us on, whatever on social media. We're definitely always upfront on the things we're working on and that are coming. And look for us and we do things with like the MBA, the Master Brewers Association, American Society of Brewing Chemists, things like that. We're always out there trying to educate people. So just, look for us out there, and we're always around to help people learn and make better beer.
Yeah. Lance, I appreciate it. Beer Talk Now community. I'm drinking beer. What are you drinking? I'll catch you on the next episode of Beer Talk Now. Cheers.
Cheers.